Hello and welcome back. If you are new here, please say hello. And of course, if you are showing up again, I always love to hear from you. So today we are going to be talking about ego fear versus real fear, and how this ego fear manifests itself in three different ways. Three examples of how ego fear is not serving you well in terms of living into alignment with who God made you to be. So before we get started, really quickly, for those of you who are new, let me introduce myself and then we'll get going. I am Becky Ajayi. I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Wyoming and have been in private practice for over a decade. Recently, with the pandemic, I have pivoted into the online space and have started offering telehealth and have created a course and membership community called Live Empowered. Check out the description. Make sure you get in there. It is a monthly membership where we talk about all these things and more. So you can ask your questions below. But for today, let's get started on talking about real fear versus ego fear, and then three different ego fears that kind of shift us out of alignment with that authentic self that we can start to be mindful of and work on keeping shifted out of. So the thing about real fear, we've all experienced it probably at some point. For example, when someone nearly sideswipes you and you have to slam on your brakes and your heart is pounding, your pupils are dilated, all of your sympathetic nervous system comes online to keep you safe. That is real fear. Then you have ego fear, which is perceived fear. It's a threat to your perception of your person. And that is not always accurate, real fear. So let's talk about three of those. The first one is this, it's kind of an inward fear. So the ego fear of that, what other people think about us. And what the ego does is it goes into worrying about, how do I keep myself safe in this situation and be for this person what I think they want me to be, which shifts you out of alignment with who God made you to be. Because it's not that we're actually afraid of what they think of us, but it's what we have made that to mean for ourselves. So I talk about this a lot. It's the meaning that you ascribe to something that then creates that issue for your ego. So if I've made it to mean that I am an awful, unlovable, unworthy human being, then of course I'm worried about what people think about me. So that is the first thing. Ego is always out there to protect us. And so it will do whatever it can to try and get you to, maintain that sort of avoidance of having people think things that we don't want them to think about us. Like, you're selfish. If I say no, then I don't want to say no because I don't want you to think I'm selfish. So that's distorted fear. That is ego fear number one. Ego fear number two is this. Our brains are wired to keep us safe, and familiar is safe, but sometimes it's not really safe, because then we start acting real rigid and unbending and difficult to deal with. So the deal about this is that inability for our ego to sort of tolerate gray, to bend to people who maybe have different thoughts, different political views, different religious views, different ideas, different perceptions. Ego fear says something that is not familiar, sameness, same to me, is threat. And we push against that and we kick against that, and we want to be right, and we want our way to be the only way, and we have a really hard time bending to see that's what ego does. It becomes unbending and rigid and doesn't want us to threaten our safety, right? Because you're threatening your safety. This is again distorted. Ego fear is that sort of distorted stuff, right? That we're working to stay out of and in alignment with who we are really, the authentic, vulnerable, real, non-ego me. Okay, so that's ego fear number two, is that sort of sameness versus different issue. That's a fear that if you have something, believe something different, think something different, have different political views, whatever, that's threat. The third ego fear is sort of this outward blame thing. We deflect and we push it out onto somebody else. Blame, to keep ourselves safe. There's this fear of I don't want to accept any sort of responsibility. So I want to draw an example here to kind of drive this fear home. So for example, if you decide you want to go to your boss and ask for a raise, you've been there a couple of years, they said you might get a raise after a year, and you decide you're going to go and ask for your raise, and the boss says no. There's two different ways your ego goes to work here, or could potentially go to work here. Is in that first ego way, where you kind of go inward, and that whole what people think about me thing, you go inwards, kind of like, I call it victim mode. There's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough, woe is me, sort of inward ego, versus that sort of outward direction of ego that blames the other person. Well, the boss is an idiot. He has no idea. I mean, he's clueless. He doesn't understand. Whatever. Blame outward. So ego has a tendency to kind of over blame, right? And so it's this piece of, what do we do with this? What do we do with the ego running away like this in there's just these three examples, and the encouragement that I'll offer you today with now what? So we know about these three different sort of ego fears. That's not the real fear. What do we do? And this is also the work that we do in the Live Empowered membership community and dive much deeper into. But what I would say is the art of noticing, getting into the art of noticing the ways in which your ego is running away, or your brain, or whatever you want to call it. Ego is kind of like the people don't like, because it's like sounds psychology therapy much, but it is this piece of listening to how the ways that your brain is trying to run away and keep you safe, how it may not be serving you well and allowing you to live into alignment with that authentic, vulnerable, real, raw you. If you want to learn more about this, you guys, make sure that you check the description below. There's also in the membership community some quick ways that you can kind of grab hold of that ego, some mindfulness work to kind of get you grounded back into your, I call it your conscious self, so that you can make better decisions when you're living consciously. If this has been helpful, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel, click the little bell for notifications, and as always, share it and tell your friends that you have found something helpful, beneficial, tangible, positive on the internet, since there are so many other things that you could be rabbit holing down on the internet. Have a great day. We will see you again soon.